Welcome to Andy's Garage. I'm Andy Phillips. Today we're going to be replacing the alternator in this Kia Rio. Now this is the 1.6 liter Hyundai engine. If you have a vehicle with this same engine, the process would be exactly the same. Let's go ahead and get started. So coming in here, this is on the passenger side. Here's our alternator right here on top. Very easy to do on this vehicle. Everything is right here, just a couple tools needed to do it. But let's head inside the vehicle, and I'm going to just explain a little bit of what happened to get us to this point to where we knew that the alternator was failing. So what happened is, while driving this vehicle, the little battery light appeared on the dash, and unfortunately, I didn't film it, so I can't show all this in this video, so I'm just going to explain it. But the battery light came on. Now, a lot of times people think that that means that your battery's bad. And even though that light does pertain sometimes to the battery, it can also pertain to the alternator and to the voltage charge in your charging system. So what happened is the light came on, but it didn't stay on. So as driving the vehicle, the light was on, but as I would rev it up or accelerate, it would go out. And that's a clear indication that your alternator is starting to fail, because as you accelerate, your belt moves faster, which rotates the pulley on the alternator quicker, and then gets a little bit of a charge out of it. Whenever I would idle or come to a stop at a light would come back on, same thing again. Accelerate, it would go out. So I knew that the alternator was failing at that point. Now, if you don't address it then you run the risk of being left on the side of the road, because what had happened, and I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of a backstory here, is after the alternator was replaced, the one that was put in was a faulty one. If you want to see a video I did where I showed how to diagnose a faulty alternator, I'll have that link across the top, also down in the description. But with that one, the voltage regulator just completely died on that thing, and it did leave me stuck on the side of the road, because then it was pulling straight from the battery and it killed the battery. So that's how we got to this point. So now what we're going to do is we're going to swap out this alternator. We'll take it for a test run and make sure everything's working fine. Now these are the items that you're going to need to complete this. Obviously, you're going to need your replacement alternator. You can pick these up online. You can pick them up at automotive parts stores. You want to go with a good one. You don't want some unbranded garbage, because you don't want it to be problematic. So you're going to need your alternator. Make sure it's for the correct vehicle. This one here that I'm working on is a 2013 Kia Rio. Next, you are going to need a ratchet. If you can get one of these articulating ratchets, I'd highly recommend that, because you're going to see there's a lower bolt on the alternator, and if you can bend the neck a little bit, that makes it easier. But either way, a ratchet, you will need a 10 millimeter socket, a 12 millimeter socket, and a 14 millimeter socket, and that's it. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start by disconnecting the negative battery cable. Anytime you deal with electrical stuff, you want to disconnect your battery. We'll set that off to the side. Next thing that we need to do, you have a harness that plugs in here on this back side of the alternator, and then you also have the battery cable that has a nut tightening it onto that stud. So that nut, if you're using the factory alternator, that should be a 12 millimeter. If it's an aftermarket one, it could be a 13, but normally it's a 12. So we're going to undo that, and then we'll be back to unplug this harness. And then there's also a connection up here and down underneath that I'm going to show you in a minute. It helps to disconnect those as well. That way you can pull this whole wire out of the way. Here's the plug here. There's the stud. And then we're also going to disconnect this one. And then there's one all the way down there. Slide that off. And then now for this, you can see there's this little tab right there that I'm pushing on. You're going to want to push that down real hard, and then just gently slide this off. There we go. Here it comes. Okay. And then now we'll do the ones up top, and then the one underneath. Just push this little tab down here, and then that comes right out also. And now the one underneath. You can see it here. Down here. Same thing, it has a little tab that you can push in. It comes right up. And now you can just take this whole wire harness to tuck it off here to the side so it's not getting in the way of what we're going to do next. Next thing that we're going to do, you have this is a 12 millimeter bolt, and basically you have another 12 millimeter here that goes into the alternator. And once you loosen that, you can adjust this to loosen or tighten the belt, because what that does is that pulls the alternator this way or that way. So before we do anything with that, you are going to want to mark where this bolt is, so that way when you put it in, you're not over tightening or under tightening the belt. If the belt is over tightened, it can create stress on the pulleys and cause problems. If it's too loose, then it can slip and cause other issues. So we're going to go ahead next and remove that. So I'm going to mark up here where we are, and then we're going to loosen this one, and then we're going to remove this, and then this whole little piece here with that bracket, that'll all come out. I'm just going to use a black Sharpie. We'll still be able to see it nice and clear, if you can see. You can use white, little dab of white or some kind of color. But now that that's on there, we can take our 12 millimeter. We'll start by loosening it here. Now we can take this, loosen it this way. You can see it getting loose already. And then we're just going to take this, unscrew it off from the alternator, and this whole little mechanism comes right out. That, you don't want to lose these either, because it's going to pop off. There we go. Goes together like that. Set this off to the side. Next we have this bracket. It helps to get that out of the way because you'll be able to pull it out easier. That has two 12 millimeter bolts holding that on as well. We'll take those off. Now these are two different sizes, so you want to keep that in mind when you take these off. But your bottom one is a shorter bolt, and I'll show you in a minute. So we'll put that one off to the side. This is the bottom one, that's the top one. And now our bracket, we'll set that off to the side. And now we can take our bottom bolt, which is our 14 millimeter. I'm going to show you that, and then we can slide this up. Here's our alternator. If we drop down, there's our 14 millimeter. Right there on the bottom. So that's what we're going to be removing. Now to get that 14 millimeter, that's where I'm going to use this articulating ratchet, because I can bend it like this to work around the alternator. You can use a straight ratchet. It's just a little bit tricky and you're hitting some of the lines in here. If you have a deeper socket, that helps as well. But let's put this on here and then we'll take this off. Bend it a little bit here. This one can be on pretty tight. There we go. Once you break it loose, you should be able to hand tighten it a little bit. Or in this case here, let's see, try. If this is the original alternator, sometimes that thing can be way over torqued. Loosen it up a little bit. You don't have to take it fully out. You're going to slide now the alternator all the way forward. You can see the belt gets loose, so we can pull the belt off. And just so you see how we can slide it forward and back, that's how the tension is tightened up. So we'll push it all the way forward. We'll get this belt. Just to slide it off the pulley. If you can, try to leave it in position. That way you don't have to redo the whole belt. And then now we can just slide this back. And we can lift it up. And it should come right out. pull it up gently. Here it comes. And then we can just pull that out. And here's our alternator. We are going to have to take this off because this has to go on the new alternator. So I'm going to remove this and then we'll be back. And here's a look inside. So that bottom bolt, that's where it goes right there. So your alternator is like this. So it slides on here. That bolt goes through it to ground it right there. And you can see our belt pulley right here. And just sliding it off to the side like I did when we put the new one in, we just put it right back on. That way we're not having to worry about feeding the whole belt all the way through again. But that's what it looks like in here. Here's our alternator, and this thing looks rough. This is the original one to my knowledge. But let's take a look and compare it to the new one, and then we'll start putting the new one in and wrap this up. This is obviously the one that came off. You can see it here compared to the new one. But definitely in need. As we mentioned, this thing was failing. But let's put the new one on. So before we put this in, I'm going to take the nut off here, off the stud. Set that off to the side. And you have the two connectors here. That's going to go down. So basically this is going to be put in with these going around where we looked in here, where that through bolt goes through. Up here you have the single one that connects to the bracket where you can adjust the tension. And then we have our plug here and then our battery cable bolts on there. So let's slide it in here. But before we do, we're going to take the stud that came off the old one and just put that on. Not going to obviously tighten it. We're just going to run it through like that. And then I will drop it in. And we're going to put it right in there. I'll get a close-up. You can see how we mounted it in. And then we can put the belt on it. You can see right here, you have that through bolt going through. It's lodged in there. So once we get it in position, we tighten that. That'll lock it in. So with this in position, we'll slide it all the way forward now. Get the belt. Slide it right over the pulley like that. Now when we pull it back, it's good. But we're going to inspect the rest of the belt and make sure it didn't come off anywhere in this process. And then we can get that bracket on. You can see the belt there is around that bottom pulley. Coming around here, obviously that's the alternator, but you can see it all the way down there around that pulley. So everything is good. And if we come down here, we'll take another look. And if I slide the alternator forward, there we go with the tension, everything looks good. So the belt did not get off the rails. In the event that the belt does come off the pulleys, here's a diagram showing you how you feed the belt through, so that way you can put it back on. So the next thing I am going to do is I'm going to reattach this bracket. And if you remember, it was the longer bolt that went on top. We're just going to hand tighten that right now. Get it all the way in, and then we'll put the bottom one in. Okay, now with that on, we can attach this. So we're going to take this, bolt it into the new alternator. You don't want to tighten it all the way because you need it to be able to move, so we'll just hand tighten it like that. Next, we'll take this one, loosen this up a little bit, so that we're keeping it on. Put it onto the bracket this way. And then for this, remember we put the markings on it, so we're going to tighten it up until that black line meets right here with this little box. And then once that lines up, we'll double check the tension on the belt. Then we can tighten that all the way up, and then we can connect the electric. Well, before we do that, we're going to properly tighten the 14 millimeter underneath. You can see our black line turning there. That looks about right. Check the tension on the belt. Belt feels good. You don't want it to be too tight, so normally when you push down, maybe about 1/4 of an inch of flexibility should be on there. So this looks good. So now we're going to tighten this one. We're going to take our 14 mil. Same thing, we're using the articulating one. That way we get a good grip on it. There we go. You want this one tight. Next we're going to slide this on. Take the nut and kinked it. And we're going to just hand tighten it right now. Just want to get this in place. We'll bring our wire harness around. We're going to plug in here, the top one, get that done. Come down on the bottom, plug that one in. Okay, and then we'll connect here to the alternator. Make sure everything is clipped in, solid, good. And then now we'll tighten this bolt on here. All right, that's tight, so you can see that one's plugged in down here, plugged in here, tighten that nut, plug that back, belt tension is good, that's been adjusted properly, that's tightened up, these two are tightened, bracket back on, and the 14 mil down there has all been tightened up. Now lastly, we're going to reconnect the battery. Get this tightened up on here. Let's see here. Okay, that's on. Let's start it up. And you'll notice there, no battery light on. Everything is working good in the charging system. That wraps up this video on how to replace the alternator on a Kia Rio or any of the other vehicles using the 1.6 liter Hyundai engine. Don't forget though, take your cord back wherever you bought your alternator from. Don't forget to return the cord. You'll get money back on that. So that wraps up this video. I hope that it helped you out with any projects you're working on with your alternator on your Kia. I'll have some other video links down on the bottom pertaining to alternators, testing them, different things like that, as well as videos pertaining to the Kia. But please send me any questions and comments. I would love to hear from you. And as always, I appreciate all the support. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time.